Hello, my name's Sean Kehoe. I'm the chairman of UKIP in Erewash constituency, and I've started a series of short talks on the manifesto and explaining each of the sections to it. Today I'm going to look at policing, but let me say two things. Firstly, today I'm speaking just as me personally, not on behalf of UKIP. I'm not presenting UKIP policy. I'm presenting my thoughts as to what we should do in the area of policing. And secondly, I'm focusing on one narrow part of policing, which is why is it wrong? What's gone wrong with the culture? And above all, how can we turn the culture around? Now, I was a police constable for 3 years after I graduated, and then I was a lawyer for 25 years. Now, that doesn't make me right. It doesn't mean I'm right in everything I say, but I think it does mean that I'm entitled to an opinion and that it's worth listening to. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Now, it took 20 years to destroy the British police from what I knew and loved, and from what people have known and loved since the days of Robert Peel. And I think it's going to take at least 5 years to turn it around. And that sounds a long time, but it's not really. And because great big organisations don't just turn around overnight. Oil tankers don't do handbrake turns. You need to move them steadily and by increments, but it can be done. And what I want to emphasise is that we need not despair about this. We have been beaten, but we have not been completely defeated. We can win back the police and change them back to what they used to be. So what are they now? Overwhelmingly different from what they were. They have a strong tendency to ignore crime. If you report a burglary, they're not interested. If you report what they call a minor theft or something, they're not interested. They're focusing, however, very heavily on monitoring social media, looking at people's tweets and Facebook posts, on repressing free speech, stopping people preaching the gospel in the street, persecuting people like Tommy Robinson and others for what they say. This is outrageous. That is not their job. Their job is to uphold free speech, not to repress it. But that's what they've been doing. Even worse, they have systematically ignored industrial scale Muslim rape gangs. It isn't that something happened in one particular place and they didn't notice it. This has been happening all over the United Kingdom, and they knew about it and they ignored it. And that to me is absolutely horrendous and wicked. Now, how do we change this? There is only one way to do it, and that is to begin at the top. And I would say we need to dismiss every officer of ACPO rank. That means Association of Chief Police Officers. That means Chief Constables, Deputy Chief Constables and Assistant Chief Constables. So each police force has these ranks, but there aren't many. There's only about 4 or 5 of them. So it's not such a big deal to get rid of them and to replace them, but the effect would be enormous. Now, who do we replace them with? I would say this: we bring in military officers from the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, retired officers, and let them do the job. Why them? Because the corrupting of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force is at least 20 years behind what's happened in the police. Therefore, retired Army and Navy and Air Force officers still have honour, integrity, courage, patriotism. And they also have leadership skills and a tremendous amount of organisational ability. Now, they need to be brought in to replace the ACPO level ranks, and their job is to impose culture change by effort and strength and force to make it happen. So let's move down a strata. Let's move down to the next level of ranks, which is the superintendents and the chief superintendents. Now, these are in charge of what we call subdivisions and divisions. A town would be a subdivision, 3 towns is a division. Now, almost all of these ranks, almost all of them at that rank, are politically correct zealots. They had to be in order to get promoted to that level and in order to ignore the rapes, because the ignoring of the Muslim rape gangs and the other things that have been happening or not happening is not the fault of police constables and sergeants on the ground. It's the fault of those above them who did not let them do their jobs. So those levels, again, I say they have to go. I'm sorry if I sound rather radical, but I can't see another way, because these are an enormous impediment to the changing of police culture, for the simple reason that they are the primary way in which police culture was perverted and altered in the first place. So they have to go, almost all of them. Well, who will replace those with? Firstly, I would say we'll bring back retired superintendents and chief superintendents, men who left the job because they couldn't stand it anymore, because it turned into the insane asylum that it now is. There are very good men that probably joined about the same time as I did in the 1980s, who grew up in the job when it was a wonderful job, when it was a British traditional police force doing the right things, serving the public, fighting crime, understanding the difference between good and evil, right and wrong, villains and citizens. They understood that their instincts were right. And when the social engineering project came into effect in the late 90s and throughout the early 2000s, and since then, those men were driven out. Well, I would say bring them back, some of them, and appoint them for a few years to look after those ranks, but also promote inspectors and chief inspectors who have shown that they have clean hands, men who have fought and railed against the system, tried their best to do what's right, and who are not contaminated with all this political correctness. There are many like that, genuine good officers, and they have been held back because they could not pass promotion boards, because they didn't hold the right opinions. Now they need to be promoted, maybe 1 or 2 ranks. A very good inspector, make him a superintendent, put him in charge of a subdivision. A very good chief inspector, promote him 2 ranks higher, put him in charge of a division. These are the men we need. Now, if we change these upper ranks, and there aren't that many people involved, really aren't, in every police force, just handfuls of officers are needed to change the culture at the top. If we do that, it will work, because the police force is like a pyramid. The overwhelming majority of officers are at the lower ranks. And I believe that the vast majority of them are normal, patriotic citizens, and they would like to do the real job as it used to be. And they would welcome it. They would actually welcome it if the culture was to change, and if they were allowed to do their proper jobs. Now, the next thing that's needed is to replace most or all of the teachers at the police training centres. They need to go, and we need to bring back retired training officers, or put in serving officers who have clean hands, who are not contaminated with all this nonsense. People who will teach traditional policing, the prevention of crime, the protection of life and property, and the detection and prosecution of offenders. That's what it's about. And that's what it should be, not footling around on Facebook and Twitter and telling tales about people. That's not what it is. And you might think I'm exaggerating, maybe you think I am, but the Metropolitan Police has 900 officers assigned to looking at people's Facebook and Twitter accounts, and it has less than that, 800 odd, dealing with murder inquiries. Now, is that insane or what? Those 900 officers assigned to social media need to be reassigned to proper jobs, and so do loads of other people. Mostly they have the word diversity or inclusion or liaison in their job title. If you find those names or those words in their job titles, basically redeploy them and you won't go far wrong. And so, when we have revitalised, changed the training centres, then we can start to recruit. When we've got the senior ranks in the right places, we can start to recruit heavily, and we need to recruit heavily. Do you know that we spend half as much on policing as we do on giving aid to foreign countries? We spend about £7 billion a year on the police, but we spend £14 billion on giving money to foreign countries, who then spend it in the most ludicrous ways, and we achieve almost nothing by it. The police need to be properly resourced, but there's no point resourcing them until they get their values right, because otherwise all you're doing is reinforcing the wrong things. So let's get them right, and then let's reinforce the police forces in terms of numbers and start to recruit. But we must recruit on merit, not on politically correct agendas about bringing in women, gays, black people, Muslims, and so forth. We just simply need to recruit the best people to do the job. And I have to say this, they will overwhelmingly be men, because you can't do the job in the police force unless the vast majority of the officers are males. In my day and before, it always used to be a proportion of 90-10. 90% men, 10% women, and it worked brilliantly. Then we were able to deal with public order matters because you had enough men to handle the violence, which could happen at any time, and the women tended to focus on other things, and they were absolutely happy with that. It worked brilliantly, and that's what we should return to. And that's another reason why the Equality Act of 2010 needs to go, because that precludes these kind of actions that I'm proposing. We must start to simply discriminate in favour of those who can do the job and do it best. Anyway, I'm hurtling towards the end of this because I want to keep the video brief. Can you please like it, comment and share on it if you liked it, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next talk. Thank you.